In 2008, in a quiet suburban town in the United States, a young woman named Julia began to experience something unnatural. What started as subtle disturbances soon spiraled into a nightmare that defied explanation. This is the story of the exorcism of Julia, a modern-day case. A story that reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are not born of fiction, but of reality. Julia was a 24-year-old woman living a simple life. She worked as a librarian, loved spending time with her family, and had a passion for painting. Her life was unremarkable in the best way possible, until the day everything changed. It began with small, almost imperceptible changes. Julia would wake up feeling exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all. She would hear faint whispers in the dead of night, but when she checked, no one was there. At first, Julia dismissed these occurrences as stress or lack of sleep. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder and the exhaustion deepened. She began to feel a constant presence, as though someone or something was watching her every move. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a descent into a darkness she could never have imagined. One night, Julia woke up to the sound of her name being called. It was a voice she didn't recognize, deep, guttural, and filled with malice. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and saw something that would haunt her forever. In the corner of her room, a shadowy figure stood, its eyes glowing faintly. It whispered her name again, and Julia felt an icy chill run down her spine. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure didn't move, but its presence filled the room, suffocating her. Julia closed her eyes, hoping it was a nightmare, but when she opened them again, the figure was still there. It began to move toward her, its form shifting and distorting as if made of smoke. Julia scrambled out of bed and ran to the door, but it was locked from the inside. She was trapped. Just as the figure reached out to her, the room suddenly fell silent. The figure vanished, and the door unlocked itself. Julia collapsed to the floor, trembling and drenched in sweat. She tried to convince herself it was a hallucination, but deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong. Over the next few weeks, Julia's life became a living nightmare. Objects would move on their own, strange symbols appeared on the walls, and the whispers grew louder. She began to experience violent mood swings, alternating between fits of rage and moments of despair. Her once peaceful home now felt like a prison, every corner hiding a new terror. Her family and friends grew concerned. They tried to help, but nothing could explain what was happening. Julia was no longer herself. It was as if something, or someone, had taken control. She would speak in languages she had never learned, her voice distorted and unnatural. At times, she would stare blankly at the walls, muttering incomprehensible phrases. One night, her family heard a loud crash from her room. They rushed in to find Julia standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by broken furniture. Her eyes were black, and her face was twisted into a grotesque smile. She turned to them and spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. "You can't save her." Julia's family was at a loss. They had tried everything: doctors, therapists, even psychics, but nothing worked. Desperate for answers, they turned to the church. Father Michael, a seasoned exorcist, agreed to meet with them. He listened to their story with a grave expression, recognizing the signs of something far beyond human understanding. Father Michael warned them that exorcisms were dangerous and not to be taken lightly. He explained that the entity tormenting Julia was powerful and would not give up without a fight. But Julia's family was willing to do anything to save her. They agreed to the exorcism, knowing it might be their only hope. The stage was set for a battle between light and darkness. one that would test the limits of faith and courage. But no one could have predicted the horrors that awaited them. The exorcism took place in a small, dimly lit church. Julia was restrained on a wooden chair, her body trembling as the ritual began. Father Michael stood before her, holding a crucifix and reciting the rites of exorcism. The air grew heavy, and the candles flickered as if an unseen force was trying to extinguish them. Julia's body convulsed violently, her voice shifting between her own and a deep, guttural growl. She screamed in languages no one could understand, her eyes rolling back into her head. The room grew colder, and a foul stench filled the air. Father Michael's voice remained steady, but his hands trembled as he continued the rites. At one point, Julia's head snapped forward, her black eyes locking onto Father Michael. She spat venomous words at him, threatening him and everyone in the room. But Father Michael stood his ground, his faith unwavering. The battle had only just begun. As the exorcism continued, the entity's fury grew. Julia's body contorted in ways that defied human anatomy, her bones cracking as she twisted and writhed. The room began to shake, and the candles were extinguished one by one. Darkness closed in, and the temperature dropped to freezing. Father Michael's voice grew louder, his words echoing through the church. He demanded the entity reveal its name and leave Julia's body. In response, Julia let out a blood-curdling scream, her voice a cacophony of growls and shrieks. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew thick with malice. At the height of the chaos, Julia's body went still. Her head tilted back, and a deep, guttural voice emerged from her lips. "I will not leave." The entity's defiance was palpable, but Father Michael refused to back down. He knew this was a battle of wills, and he was determined to win. Father Michael intensified the rites, his voice booming through the church. He called upon divine power, demanding the entity leave Julia's body. Slowly, the entity began to weaken. Julia's body trembled violently, and her screams grew more desperate. The room grew brighter, as if light was pushing back the darkness. The entity's voice grew weaker, its threats turning to pleas. It begged to be left alone, promising to leave Julia in peace. But Father Michael knew better. He continued the rites, his faith unshakable. The battle was nearing its end, but the cost was high. Finally, with one last ear-piercing scream, the entity was expelled. Julia's body went limp, and the room fell silent. The candles flickered back to life, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Julia was free, but the scars of the ordeal would remain forever. After the exorcism, Julia returned home, but she was never the same. The experience left her deeply scarred, both physically and emotionally. She rarely spoke of what happened, but those who knew her could see the shadow of fear in her eyes. Her once vibrant personality was replaced by a quiet, haunted demeanor. Julia continued to paint, but her art took on a darker tone. Her canvases were filled with twisted, nightmarish images, as if she was trying to exorcise the memories that still haunted her. Her family did their best to support her, but they knew she would never fully recover. Despite the trauma, Julia found solace in her art. It became her way of coping, of making sense of the horrors she had endured. But the question remained: had the entity truly left, or was it still lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity? Even after the exorcism, Julia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. At night, she would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the whispers to return. The shadows in her room seemed to move on their own, and the air felt heavy with an unseen presence. Her family tried to reassure her, but Julia knew better. She had seen the face of evil, and it had left an indelible mark on her soul. She began to sleep with the lights on, afraid of what the darkness might bring. The fear was constant, a reminder that the battle was far from over. Julia's story serves as a chilling reminder that some horrors never truly leave. They linger in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And for Julia, the nightmare was far from over. The exorcism of Julia is a chilling reminder that the line between our world and the unknown is thinner than we think. If you, or someone you know, has experienced something unexplainable, we want to hear your story. Share your encounters via email or voicemail. Who knows? Your story might be the next one we tell. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a terrifying story. If this video gave you goosebumps, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends, because some curses are too dangerous to face alone.